All right. I'm going to start with the thing that I always start with every year, and that is starting clean. Whether you're using tillage or burn down applications, the key to getting a good corn crop started is to start clean. There are a lot of burn down applications that you can use, and if you're using no-till, of course, if you're using tillage, then that's simple enough to start clean. But just making sure that you start with a clean bed. Last year I tried to say that at all of my meetings, and it seemed as though I went through the fields and I didn't see a lot of people starting clean. So if we can stress this, that will minimize a lot of the issues that start out in the beginning. I do recommend going with 2 shots of atrazine in split applications. I used to put it all out at one time, but I think that if you put out a quart pre or at planting, and then you put out a quart and a half later, I think you get more residual, and I think you'll find that it does a lot of good for you, and that will help start it clean. But if you wait until the weeds are up and you don't have anything out, then you're going to have some issues. So when should you use a residual? This is the difference between using one and not using one. There's a big difference. Burn downs, definitely, but you need to use it at pre and at post applications as well. And anything that has a residual, from atrazine to dual to prowl to sharpen or verdict, any of these products that are going to give you some long-standing activity that's going to last throughout. You get a lot of complaints from morning glories, but a lot of that can start at the beginning of the season. I'm going to show you some data of a test that we did last year that really showed how long morning glory could stay out of your corn crop depending on which product you use. Now this is horseweed, which I know in South Alabama they don't have this issue, but I think this is a tillage issue because they till down there, and in northern parts of the state it's no-till. But you see the population. This is a close-up of the populations. This just had 1.5 ounces of sharpen on it, and you can stay clean. We even did fall burn down applications to where we could spray it in the fall and then come back, and we compared it to dicamba plus 8 ounces of dicamba plus glyphosate versus glyphosate plus sharpen versus glyphosate plus verdict. And depending on what weed problem you have, depends on which burn down you need to go with. But having a residual really can make a difference, because you couldn't plan into this type of horseweed stand. This is a test that Larry Steckel and I did in Tennessee and in Alabama the past 2 years. And it's going to become more important with the new Ingenia and XtendiMax and the Enlist crops that are coming out. But it also, you can use those, the dicambas and the 2,4-Ds and some of these other products anyway. So I wanted to point out that we were looking at the effect of the application time of day. If you're familiar with Liberty, you know that depending on what time of day you use it, that it can make a difference on how well it works. So what we did was we looked at putting out these products and what time of day we put them out. We had 3 times a day. We put them out at sunrise, at midday, and at sunset. Then we rated, this was for mare's tail control or horseweed, at 7, 14, 21, and 28 days. And I just want you to pay attention to the 28-day. But at 28 days, with 2,4-D, you got the best control at midday, as you did with the dicamba. But then it fell off to 82% at sunrise, and then it went down to 74% control with 2,4-D at sunset. So there was a big time of day difference with 2,4-D with mare's tail control. There was differences between the midday applications but it went from 94 to 88%, depending on if you went sunset and sunrise on dicamba. So there wasn't as much of an effect, but there was an effect on that. You look at glufosinate, and this is what you would expect. You have the high, the good mare cell control in the middle of the day. At sunset, it's not as good, it's 79%, but then at sunrise, it's 63. That's what we would expect to find. We looked at gramoxone or paraquat, and we had, at sunset and sunrise, we had very good control of the mare cell. We had 85% and 92% control, which were not different. But if you sprayed them at midday, it was 59% control. And it being a photosynthetic inhibitor, this surprised a lot of people. So, you know, normally we would think that gramoxone would be one of those that you would spray in the middle of the day and you would get the most activity. But what it seems to be doing is it's burning off the plant, and then it's not able to go down to the root and kill the whole plant. Because if you notice, from 7 days, it did 84%, and then it went slightly down, and these are about the same, 73 and 75, but then it went way down at 30 days or 28 days, which is 59%. Whereas the sunset and the sunrise applications maintain pretty well the same thing. So that's something you'll want to consider about, is when you're spraying gramoxone, especially for burn downs, is what time of day you want to apply them. The saflufenicil, which is sharpen, is one of the active ingredients in Verdict. We had the best control at midday and sunset, followed by the sunrise control. So we did have slightly better control midday to afternoon than we did in the morning. So these are some things that you just want to consider when you're applying these burn down herbicides. I want to show you some plots that we put out this year. This was looking at some Anthem Max and some Solstice corn, both pre and post, to give you an idea of what we had. This is the untreated check. And we spray, if you see the flags, that's where we sprayed the middles of it. So we only sprayed the 2 center rows. This is 94 days after the post application. So we had Anthem Max plus atrazine followed by Roundup. You see there's still a lot of Morning Glory in here. As I said, I like to have 2 shots of atrazine, but this is how we did this one. This is all in the same field though. So this is the Anthem Max at a slightly lower rate at 2.5 ounces, followed by Solstice plus atrazine plus Roundup. And it cleaned it up a lot better than the other did. This is the Anthem Max followed by Solstice plus atrazine and Roundup plus crop oil. So it did a good job. And you see it's drying down, so this is late in the season. This is the Anthem Max plus atrazine followed by Solstice plus atrazine. So we've got 2 shots of atrazine in this, plus the Roundup. And it looks pretty clean, especially when you look at the alleys where you've got all these grasses on them.
When you're saying this followed by, how often? What's the
That would be
time?
between a pre and an early post. So that's what I mean by that. And then if it's followed by something else, it would be a mid post. So that's how we gauge that. So then this one was using Bicep 2 Magnum, followed by Solstice plus atrazine plus Roundup. And so this one stayed pretty clean as well because Bicep 2's been out for a long time. And then this is looking at one of the newer products which contains atrazine in it. And this is just 1 shot of Acuron at 80 fluid ounces, followed by Roundup. Acuron contains 4 different products in it. And it was very impressive what we looked at. We put this test in 2 locations, and it was really good. The prices are what's going to weigh what, is going to be the best thing. And I've got a chart that'll show you kind of the weed control on it in just a few minutes. And this is Acuron Roundup with a crop oil. So again, it shows pretty clean plots for, these were heavy morning glory areas that were already established. And this is a solstice at 2.5 plus Anthem Flex 2 plus atrazine plus Roundup plus the crop oil. So you still see some morning glory coming in from the sides. This one didn't look quite as good to me as some of the other ones did. And then this is kind of the standard, the Halix GT plus the crop oil that many of our growers use and seem to be very pleased with. Some other corn programs I looked at, this was an untreated check, so it shows you how much palmer is out there. There's so much out there that it's decreasing the corn populations. And this was 60 days after planting. So this was including atrazine, zidua, and verdict, all pre, and that you have to include an MSO with that. But after 60 days, it was still clean. This is the verdict again, zidua, atrazine, and then Roundup. So compared to the one before it, you don't necessarily need the Roundup unless you've got some grasses coming in there. This is zidua, atrazine, and Roundup, plus an MSO. You still see some grasses coming through there. This is the Halix GT plus atrazine and a crop oil. And it looks really good. This is zidua, callisto, and atrazine and Roundup. And this is verdict zidua followed by Armazon Pro plus atrazine plus Roundup. So you're starting to get several different modes of action in there. Someone had asked me why, if you had atrazine out there in verdict, why would you need zidua? Well, zidua just adds some additional broadleaves to it. It's not necessarily something you have to have, but the verdict does take, it has a broadleaf and a grass material in it because it has sharpen, plus it has outlook in it. So it does cover those two grounds, and then the atrazine gets, pretty much everything else. The zidua just gives additional broadleaf material to it. So one thing you could cut from this would be the zidua. And this is the Armazon Pro plus atrazine plus Roundup. So you're not seeing a lot of differences depending on which combination you use on these. Now, looking at a study that we did, and we're going to repeat it this year, but it was looking at all the HPPD inhibitors to see what truly was the difference between them. Because there's so many out there, and we're looking for extended morning glory control. So could be kind of hard to see, but what we did was we looked at just morning glory species. It was mostly made up of pitted morning glory and of entire leaf morning glory. There could be a few out there that, weren't in every plot, but that was the majority of it. So we looked at Acuron, Armazon Pro, Balance Flex, Callisto, Caprino, Corvus, Halix GT, Laudis, Lexar Easy, and Revulon Q. And this was our 90-day rating. And of the 90-day ratings, the Callisto and the Revulon Q were still providing 80% morning glory control, which was pretty good.
Is that absolute control or relative to the untreated control?
Relative to the untreated. But we have an untreated check on either side. So it's pretty accurate with what we have, because that's what we rate next to. The others, as you see, the lowest one was the Armazon at 71, followed by the Acuron at 73. So all of them were really pretty close, and there weren't differences with any of them. But I was very impressed with how much morning glory control we got. Not that one. Okay, what am I doing wrong? Wrong click.
Just hit one of these.
Oh, there we go. Okay, then those were with atrazine. Now, what we did was the plots that had atrazine, for example, let me back up. Oh, wrong way. Okay, this one. Okay, for example, like Acuron already has atrazine, so we included it with these. There's several of these that do not contain any atrazine, so half of our plots were sprayed with atrazine, and then the ones that did not contain atrazine were put out on those. Then we did them completely without atrazine. So these are the ones with atrazine. If you look at the ones without atrazine, you had lower control, which I would expect. The Callisto and the Armazon, the Corvus and the Revulon Q were still the highest ones. Caprino dropped off, and so did Armazon Pro. But it did show that having the atrazine out there does make a difference. And so, as cheap as it is, and as long as we can get it and use it, then I suggest continuing to use it. It shows that there's not that much of a difference between these, but we're going to look at these again, and we're going to do a 120 rating or a 110, 115, as late as we can get one right before harvest, and just see how the morning glory is at the end. And if we can figure out, which one has overall the best morning glory treatment. Because that's the question I'm asked the most of. And I thought I had one more in here. And I guess I took it out. But I was going to go over the fact that right now, currently, what I suggest for late season morning glory control, and it's not really late season, is using either Halix GT or Callisto and including Status with that. You can spray it up to 30-inch cotton. And right now, that's about the best morning glory material I found. Now, of course, you can always go over the top with AIM and desiccate it, but you have to have the equipment to be able to do that. And so that's an option that you have right there, is to use those products for late season morning glory control, even though it's not really that late season, but it is something you can consider. Purpose of us looking at these products was just to see how long we could go with early post application, and because they're all saying that they are season-long control of these different weeds, and so we wanted to try out and see how long their season-long control is. So we know 90 days it did pretty well, but we want to stretch it until the very end of the season. So that's all I have.
I have a question for you, because I really like when you say start clean, because that helps us from an insect point of view too, particularly the cutworms and southern corn rootworm, some of these things that are just sort of lurking out there in the weeds. And how we like to have, say, burn it down 30 days before planting.
Mm-hmm.
Is that too early in terms of you?
It depends. I mean,
I know the earlier you put down your burn down, the less
longer it
residual
lasts.
you're going to have.
Right.
But 30 days is good for us from an insect point of view. So I was just curious about what you would recommend burn down.
I like 14 days, but some of the labels prohibit that, depending on the crop. Some of ours can be 30 days, some of them, depending on rate and depending on crop, it can be 30 days, it can be 42 days. And so, but the sooner you can do it to planting, the better. Simply
From a weed control
from a
point of
weed
view.
control point of view, simply because that way you get longer residual.
Right.
So, so that's what I prefer. But of course, you have to go by the labeling requirements.
Right, okay, right. And if you can't burn down 30 days ahead and you've got a thick weed cover, what we would say is, at planting, perhaps mix in an inexpensive pyrethroid that's labeled on the crop to help control the cutworm. This will be for those minimum tillage situations, because they're at higher risk of
And see
early
now,
season insect damage. And our seed treatments don't do as well on those great big cutworms.
we've got now the auxins that you can put out at planting with no plant back date. You can put it out the day you plant, So that's gonna be another issue that's not gonna help with
That's not gonna help with the insects, so
with the
that's
insects.
good to
Usually,
know.
you had 14 days, well now,
Yeah, 14 days would be better than none, but.
right.
Yeah.
But now the no days is gonna really,
All right,
gonna have a hard time with insects.
yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you. Let's go ahead and